Daytime soap operas in the 80s and 90s were absolutely bananas. I mean, if Bo and Hope weren't throwing a royal wedding in Salem on Days of Our Lives, then Luke and Laura were over on General Hospital saving Port Charles and the world from being frozen over. These soaps did some unbelievable things, and our moms and grandmas couldn't get enough of these stories. But there were times when these soap operas just took it a step too far, which means I had to put together a list of the most insane storylines that I can remember. Now, I'm not talking about the plots in crazy primetime shows like the Moldavian Massacre on Dynasty or the return of Bobby Ewing after the dream season of Dallas. I'm talking the daytime shows that Gen Xers only saw during the summertime or when we were homesick from school. The shows that got their name because their commercials sold laundry soap to the housewives. And unbelievably, some of them are still airing on some random streamer or cable channel to this day. I'm going to be laser focused on the storylines from the 80s, 90s, and the very early aughts. So you won't see Taylor Hayes accidentally giving birth to Nick and her arch rival Brooke's baby on The Bold and the Beautiful. That happened in 2007. And you won't see anything from Passions, which ran from 1999 to 2008 and was just batshit crazy from start to finish. We also won't see Erica Kane's aborted fetus come to life on All My Children, a story that began in 1973 and then was later resurrected in the mid 2000s when it was discovered that the doctor who performed the abortion actually implanted the baby into his wife's uterus, and then later that baby grew up to terrorize his biological mother. But you will see some clones, aliens, and a princess in a virtual Garden of Eden. Now, before we get started, I have to point out that I didn't include any storylines from The Young and the Restless because they didn't really have anything on par with what I'm about to talk about, and the CBS network are absolute tyrants when it comes to old clips from their shows. I can hardly find any clips anywhere. So, if you're here for some Y&R, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get this show on the road. So, Reva Shane was the iconic heroine of Guiding Light, and she underwent pretty much every journey possible during her 21 years on the show. And that makes her the perfect person to kick off this list. But it definitely won't be the last Reva storyline we're going to talk about. So in 1990, Reva was suffering from postpartum depression when she plunged to her death, quote unquote, off an unfinished bridge in the Florida Keys due to Kim Zimmer leaving the show. But then, 5 years later, Zimmer came back and the deceased Reva resurfaced in the old timey Amish community of Goshen with a bad case of amnesia and a keen interest in butter churning. Reva was convinced she was an Amish woman named Rebecca. And there she might have stayed too, were it not for the horse drawn carriage accident that reunited her with her old flame, Alan Spaulding, and started her down the path to remembering that she wasn't a prim and proper Amish lady, but the notorious Slut of Springfield. So, one of General Hospital's most famous and most crazy storylines was set in motion in 1981, and it involved infamous villainess Helena Cassadine and her megalomaniac husband Mikos, who plotted global domination by freezing the world, starting with Port Charles. Helena and Mikos stole the world's biggest uncut diamond, dubbed the Ice Princess, because the gem would allow them to take over the world by using a secret formula hidden in the base of a statuette. But Luke Spencer and his love Laura foiled the evil plot and stopped the weather machine's carbonic snow. Luke invaded the base and he and Miko struggled until the villain fell into his own ice chamber and froze to death. With the world's climate hanging in the balance, Luke typed the words Ice Princess into the device to end the dastardly plot, which prompted Helena to curse Luke and Laura on their wedding day. On Days of Our Lives, one of the evil Stefano DiMira's greatest brainwashing successes was using a remote controlled satellite to turn on a chip in Hope Brady's brain containing all of the memories of skanky art thief Princess Gina von Almberg, and thereby convincing Hope that she was Gina and getting her to help him with more art heists. Did you get all of that? So let's go back a little bit. Gina was married to Prince Philip von Amberg and she gave birth to a daughter, Greta, soon after Prince Philip died in a yachting accident. After Philip's death, Princess Gina became a skilled art thief and forger who was hired and then manipulated by the evil Stefano de Mura. In the 1980s, Stefano partnered Gina with his brainwashed pawn, John Black, and they fell in love. But then, Stefano altered John's personality and reassigned him. But Gina believed that John was dead, which caused her to become mentally ill, and then she no longer wanted to paint, which made her useless to Stefano. So, of course, he imprisoned her at home in the countryside outside Paris. Stefano was able to get a replacement for Gina by abducting the presumed dead Hope Brady, who resembled Gina, and implanting a microchip that gave her Gina's memories and personality. Hope lived as Gina for several years in the early 1990s until Stefano decided to deactivate the chip. Then, after all of that, Hope returned to her normal life, but with amnesia of her years as Gina. During the 80s and 90s, Christian Alfonso played all three characters: Hope, Hope when she thought she was Gina, and Gina herself. Fortunately, viewers could tell the difference thanks to two blonde streaks that magically appeared in her hair when she became Gina. So, while we still have the Princess Gina storyline fresh in our minds, it's the perfect time to meet Princess Greta von Omberg, the daughter of con artist and royal Princess Gina, who's also the lookalike of Salem's own Hope Brady. Greta used to live in a cave and was dubbed Swamp Girl until she had a makeover. So, this is the story. After Hope Brady was believed to be dead, Days viewers watched her husband, Beau Brady, search for clues about her past. Eventually, Beau went to New Orleans looking for information about Hope, and that's when he found a woman who was dirty and covered in scars, known as Swamp Girl. Swamp Girl was revealed to have taken the place of Hope on the Days of Our Lives epic Cruise of Deception, and it was actually her that everyone believed to see die instead of Hope. I know, it doesn't make much sense. Anyways, the woman got herself cleaned up with the help of Beau and Billy Reed. She even had laser surgery to remove her scars. It was later revealed that she was Greta von Omberg, the daughter of Princess Gina, and that's when Days fans watched Greta come to Salem with Beau, and she, of course, ended up falling for him, but her feelings weren't reciprocated, and Greta quickly moved on to Eric Brady, who was then played by Jensen Ackles. That pair dated for a while, but called it quits after Eric cheated on Greta with his former girlfriend Nicole. And after it was confirmed that Greta's mother Gina had died, Greta decided to take her rightful place as the princess. But this is where it gets weird because she had to prove herself first. Gina and her then fling hottie Austin Reed had to go through a test called the Garden of Eden, where she was forced to complete challenges such as fight off enemies like Sammy Brady, her mother, Curtis Reed, and even Satan himself. In the end, you'll be pleased to learn the pair did manage to defeat evil, but after completing her tasks, her romance with Austin fizzled out, and Greta set her sights on Jack Devereaux. But Jack wasn't interested, and with no reason to stay in Salem, Greta left town for good.
Good evening, my friends. Let me be the first one to welcome you to Eternity.
1989, One Life to Live featured a storyline about the discovery of a lost gold-filled underground city called Eterna, which conveniently lay directly under Lantano Mountain near the town of Landview, where all the characters lived. Who knew? This show poured so much cash into the creation of the largest set ever constructed for a daytime series. It was a multi-level 360-degree city built in a studio separate from the usual series headquarters. Real well drillers were even hired to use the equipment needed to dig the characters out of the city at its conclusion. The twisting, extending plot lasted for several months and involved a baby that a teenage Vicky had been hypnotized to forget she ever gave birth to, a hunt for legendary gold hidden in the city, multiple characters getting trapped underground thanks to an avalanche, and a convenient as well as gigantic TV screen that helpfully played videotapes to explain Eterna's history. Booby traps set to prevent Eterna from being looted ensured the trapped characters were in a state of constant peril, and in the end, a grab for a giant gold angel triggered the city's self destruct mode. Cue the well drillers who saved nearly everyone before the entire city went up in flames. Let's get back to General Hospital. As the title suggests, General Hospital centers on a hospital and its employees in the town of Port Charles in upstate New York. So viewers were understandably confused when in 1990 an alien named Casey Rogers came to visit from the planet Lumina. He was found by the show's tween dream, Robin Scorpio, and the two quickly became BFFs. But there wasn't any time for Casey and Robin to talk about boys, hair braiding, or Sweet Valley High. He was searching for a magic crystal that would send him back home. The problem was the crystal was on Spoon Island with enemy Cesar Faison, who was using the pseudonym PK Sinclair. Robin ends up convincing her super spy parents, Robert and Anna, as well as Frisco and Felicia Jones, that Casey is an alien, and so they help him recover the otherworldly rock from the clutches of the sinister Faison. This space cadet obtains the critical intergalactic crystal that sends him rocketing back to planet Lumina, and he leaves behind a doppelganger named Shep to woo Robin's mother, Anna. The Casey the Alien storyline was inspired by the popular movie Starman, and as you can imagine, it was met with very mixed reviews. It received criticism for its implausibility, but it was able to keep some level of fan interest due to the popular characters involved in the storyline. We are back to Reva Shane, the heroine of Guiding Light, who was put through the ringer throughout the 90s in the most unbelievable and absurd ways. For instance, Reva once washed upon a deserted island and managed to find her way to a phone and call home, and then she heard her own voice on the other end. It turned out that Reva's true love, Josh, had been searching desperately for Reva and came to believe that she had died again. So, using soap opera logic, he hired Dr. Michael Burke to clone his supposedly dead wife from the eggs she'd left behind. Within 2 weeks, Josh was holding a cloned baby Reva.
I'd like you to meet Reva Shane.
Luckily, he had an aging serum to help him age his Reva clone, and soon she was a free spirited teenager. Just a few days later, she was finally a properly aged Reva clone, and that's when the real Reva called from the deserted island. Clone Reva took over Josh's affections, and once real Reva returned to Springfield, Clone Reva worked to stop real Reva from getting back the man she loved by knocking her out and locking her in the lighthouse. Reva eventually convinced her clone to let her teach her how to get Josh to love her. And even though Josh slept with the clone, he cannot bring himself to love her though because she doesn't have Reva's spirit. Eventually, the clone locked Reva up in the pool house at the Lewis home, but at the same time, Josh just decides to marry the clone. Like, he's just like, Reva's gone, so I'm just gonna marry the clone. So weird. But but Reva didn't want to die in the pool house, so she talks her clone into bringing her a video camera so she could watch tapes of her kids. But instead, she makes a videotape telling Josh she's locked in the pool house. The clone returns to the house and pops the tape in and stops it just in time to realize that Reva had conned her. But Josh overhears a part of the tape, and eventually he starts to put the pieces together. Running into the pool house, Josh finally sees the two Revas and he reunites with the real love of his life. But then the story twists again, and it's revealed that Reva had bonded with her clone and had pity for her, so she turned her into her long lost cousin Dolly. But Dolly wasn't able to settle into her new identity. She was still very much in love with Josh. So she decided to take another route, an overdose on the aging serum so that she would die. And that way, Josh and Reva would be able to move on with their life together. In the end, Dolly, aka Clone Reva, died in her own arms. Okay, This is arguably one of the most bizarre storylines to come out of the 90s. It was written by James Harmon Brown and Barbara Eisenstein. Essensten? I can't really pronounce that last name, but that's okay. This story was universally panned by the critics, and it kind of made Guiding Light something of a laughing stock in the soap industry. Bad boy, good girl. It's an old cliche, a soap cliche, even a days cliche, and they went all in on it in the late 1980s with the love story of Steve Patch Johnson and Kayla Brady. In addition to the challenges posed by the differences between them in class, moral code, family, and background, plus the grudge he held against her brother for putting out his eye, Days actually chose to start this couple off by having Patch scare Kayla out of Cleveland, where she was living, by breaking into her apartment, making threatening phone calls, and gently pretending to be an obsessed stalker. As one does, Kayla fell for her pretend stalker, and he fell for her, but Patch was convinced he wasn't good enough for Kayla, which led to months and months and months and months and months of on again, off again soap opera drama that resulted in Kayla's heart getting broken over and over. So, once again using soap opera logic, Kayla decided to marry Jack Devereaux instead of Patch. Of course, Kayla starts cheating with Patch almost immediately, and when Jack finds out, he essays Kayla and has Patch beaten up. Yikes. Kayla leaves Jack and then moves in with Patch. And oh, wait, did I mention that during all of this we find out that Jack and Patch are actually brothers who were separated as kids when they were orphaned? Anyways, one night Kayla is home alone when she gets attacked, and the scuffle starts a chain of events that causes her building to explode. Thankfully, Patch arrives home just in time and rushes into the burning basement and carries Kayla out. In the hospital, Kayla wakes up and is deaf from the explosion due to damaged eardrums, which somehow causes her to lose her ability to speak or write words on paper. So she starts to communicate with sign language. Meanwhile, they make a big deal out of Patch learning sign language in order to communicate with Kayla. For weeks and weeks, Kayla's hearing loss and complete inability to speak and communicate was central to their storyline, causing Kayla to doubt her future with Patch because she couldn't hear. But then Kayla gets a chance to possibly restore her hearing and speaking by undergoing surgery. If the surgery succeeds, she marries Patch and all of her dreams come true, but if it doesn't, she's doomed to a life of loneliness and silence. She takes the chance and has the surgery, but it doesn't appear to be successful at first. Still, Kayla continues to sign as she and Patch plan their wedding. Then she slowly starts to get her hearing back, but for some reason still can't speak until their wedding day, a day 2 years in the making, when Kayla finally gets her voice back just in time to say her vows. On the March 31st, 1980 episode of Ryan's Hope, the storyline became an obvious homage to King Kong when a gorilla named Prince Albert dropped Delia Coleridge off a tower, and everybody laughed. Everybody thought that it was a grotesque attempt on the part of the otherwise realistic ABC soap to cash in on an iconic big screen moment. But at least Delia's little romance with Prince Albert the gorilla was a refreshing change of pace from the usual soap opera fare of adultery, unwed motherhood, more adultery, and look-alike twin sisters. You see, what happened was the trouble prone Delia made friends with a gorilla named Congo in the New York Zoo. But to her, he was Prince Albert, and to him, she was the queen bee who could do no wrong. He trusted her implicitly, and their romance went on for weeks. But in true Delia fashion, she ended up betraying him. When Albert broke loose from his cage, Delia tricked him back into it, and he couldn't forgive her. So one dark night, he escaped again, tracked her down at her new restaurant called Delia's Crystal Palace, and he abducted her. Then the gorilla carried her up Central Park's Delacorte Theater tower and threw her from the parapet. If you have an interest in watching this whole storyline play out, there is actually a 10-episode playlist titled The Mob and Prince Albert, made over a decade ago by a YouTuber named Artax84Z. And I'm not going to lie, even though it's like 17 hours long, I may binge it. It sounds like a good time. This one's going to be a short entry on this list because we'd be here all day if I went into the details of this storyline, but it had to be mentioned. So here's how the story of the Gemini twins started on Days of Our Lives. In 2002, the Gemini meteor showers brought a pair of insanely sexy, butt naked alien life forms to Salem. Following a 4th of July picnic with their parents, teen lovers Sean Brady and Belle Black discovered what appeared to be a spacecraft. Upon further inspection, the unidentified glowing object housed two barely communicable and barely clothed beings. Actually, they were naked. The naked non speakers came to be known as Rex and Cassie. Viewers eventually learned that Rex and Cassie weren't aliens at all, somehow. Instead, they were the biological children of Roman Brady and Kate Roberts. In one of the most demented stories The Bold and the Beautiful ever told, we learned that Stephanie Forrester had let her husband Eric believe for eons that their oldest daughter Angela had been stillborn. But that wasn't the truth. Angela was actually born microcephalic, a medical condition that causes an abnormally small head. Stephanie then secretly bought a house using her maiden name of Douglas and hired a medical staff to care for Angela, with Eric, her husband, having no idea. Ultimately, in what can only be described as a horrible accident, Angela's doctor forgot to set the brakes on her wheelchair, which caused her to take a fatal fall down a hill to her death. The careless doctor wasn't done, though. In the aftermath of Angela's death, he wanted to continue bilking Stephanie out of large amounts of cash. So he brought in a substitute for his secret patient, a woman who had lost her marbles after being badly singed in a car crash. Then, instead of telling Stephanie about her daughter's death, he told her that her daughter needed reconstructive surgery due to her injuries. The Forresters eventually discovered that Angela was alive and welcomed her into the family. But it wasn't long until Stephanie discovered that this was not the real Angela, but in fact an imposter. Deciding to confront them, fake Angela and the doctor fled Los Angeles, and Stephanie was forced to grieve the death of her long dead biological daughter. This next one was a big deal when I was in college. I remember watching this one almost every day at my apartment at Jayhawk Towers at the University of Kansas with my roommates. We couldn't get enough of this one. It happened back in 1996. It was on Days of Our Lives, and Kristen Demura, played by Eileen Davidson, suffered a miscarriage, but she was desperate to give John a baby. So her solution was to hire a pregnant lookalike named Susan Banks, who was also played by Davidson. She hired her and convinced her to give up her baby after Susan had fallen pregnant by sleeping with Stefano, who was disguised as Elvis Presley at the time. Susan was a big fan. Then Susan fell head over heels in love with John, and she refused to give up the baby, which she called Elvis Jr. Instead, she decided to imprison Kristen and Marlena in the Demura dungeon, because the Demuras had a dungeon, of course, and she assumed Kristen's identity. The grand plan went awry, though, on Kristen, or fake Kristen, and John's Elvis-themed wedding day after she lost her false teeth. I swear. This storyline was absolutely insane, and wow, did it keep Davidson busy. She not only played both roles of Kristen and Susan, she also played Susan's siblings, Sister Mary Mora, Penelope, and hitman brother Thomas. Back to Reva once again over in Springfield on Guiding Light for the last time on this list. Back in 2001, she had another insane storyline when she became so fixated on a painting that she allowed it to transport her through time to Civil War era New Orleans. The storyline is extremely difficult to explain because it somehow involved Riva and royalty on an island called San Cristobal. There was a royal council involved, and Riva was eventually left blinded by a car accident caused by Edmund, San Cristobal's ruler. When Reba finally got back to Springfield, her vision returned, and then she went on a trip to Chicago where she found herself drawn to a painting, which seemed to talk to her. Reba found the painting and took it home, and at the same time, she started experiencing psychic visions. Then, the reveal came that Reba could actually travel through time via the painting. Her first destination was Edwardian England and later the Civil War. Both times, Reba found herself face to face with people and situations that mirrored her own in Springfield. While she rambled on and on about time travel to anyone who would listen, Josh put her in therapy and Olivia wanted her committed. But once again, using soap opera logic, Josh eventually came to believe Reva, and they somehow traveled together to Edwardian England and then to Germany during the Second World War, where they discovered that their enemies, the Spaldings, had been Nazi sympathizers. Then they used this scandalous information to blackmail Alan Spaulding in present day. I think this video has made it pretty clear that Days of Our Lives got out of hand in the 90s, thanks to head writer James E. Riley's penchant for supernatural shenanigans. And usually at the center of the craziness was heroine Dr. Marlena Evans, an iconic character played by Deidre Hall for decades. By September of 2003, the show had taken a dark turn when the streets of Salem, the friendly Midwestern city at the heart of the long running NBC soap opera, began running with blood. That's when a figure in a black hood fatally shot mild mannered police commander Abraham Carver on his front doorstep. And over the next 7 months, Salemites lived under a cloud of fear as 9 more residents, many of them played not by dispensable newcomers, but by beloved veteran actors whose combined airtime totaled an astonishing 158 years, dropped like clay pigeons. Needless to say, viewers recoiled in disbelief. It was eventually revealed that Dr. Marlena Evans was the one who suddenly decided to kill off many of Salem's most beloved citizens for absolutely no reason. This town do gooder started offing her close friends in what became known as the Salem Stalker storyline, and it grew more graphic and ironic each and every day. Recovering alcoholic Maggie Horton was bludgeoned by a liquor bottle. The bloody corpse of troubled teen Cassie Demira tumbled out of a turkey shaped pinata on Thanksgiving Day. And the town's patron saint, Alice Horton, poor thing choked on a donut, her culinary specialty, that was forced down her throat. Of course, it turned out that Marlena was being framed, and the entire town was actually alive on the island of Meliswen, which is New Salem spelled backwards. Who was to blame for the horrific bait and switch? Tony DeMira, of course, that's who it was. But only that was a reveal. That reveal was a trick. The real faux killer was a local baddie who wanted to break up all the couples in town. Tony DeMira's look-alike cousin, Andre. If there is one defining moment in American soap operas, it is most definitely Luke and Laura's wedding on General Hospital. The nuptials of the so-called super couple, played by Anthony Geary and Jeannie Francis, was a major television event when it aired in November 1981. It brought in 30 million viewers to the ABC series, the largest audience ever for a soap opera, and it made the duo one of the most iconic super couples in soap history. But as famous and beloved as the couple is, their relationship actually started out in the most insane way possible. In an October 1979 episode, Luke graped Laura on their very first date, and that's exactly how the show initially played it. But then, the event was later looked back on and retconned as a seduction because the Luke and Laura pairing became so insanely popular. The characters remained together for decades, with their love story a major part of the series until Geary left the cast in 2015. Frances said in a 2023 interview that she was only 17 when she filmed that scene, and she didn't understand the gravity of the event she was portraying. But looking back, she says the scene was inappropriate, and she refuses to defend it any longer. When folks say that daytime soaps are silly, unreal, and over the top, often what they mean is that they vaguely heard the Days of Our Lives storyline, in which beloved heroine Marlena Evans was demonically possessed. The exorcism of Marlena Evans has gone down in soap opera history as one of the wildest storylines on daytime, and for me, it's the most insane soap opera storyline ever. Here's how it went down. In late 1994, Stefano DeMura started drugging Dr. Marlena Evans night after night while she slept so he could have his wicked way with her. Unfortunately, this constant stream of mind-altering drugs left her open to demonic possession. As a result, Marlena completely switched personalities and she became possessed by the devil. For weeks, vandalism, drought, and bee attacks became regular occurrences in Salem, and viewers became familiar with the sound of Marlena's eerie devil voice and the sight of her eyes glowing green, not to mention her levitating, morphing into other characters, and on one occasion, transforming into a panther. As Days of Our Lives executive producer Ken Corday explained in 2010, the Marlena devil possession storyline was only about 25 years after The Exorcist, and head writer James E. Riley walked into his office to tell him he wanted to do a serial version of that story. Marlena's possession was supposed to last just 3 months, starting somewhere around Halloween and ending with a Christmas miracle. But Riley ended up dragging the possession storyline into Easter. Marlena was finally freed thanks to John Black performing an emergency exorcism, who luckily remembered he'd been ordained as a priest. As Corday explained, Riley literally ended the possession with John Black standing over Marlena and saying, "One Our Father." With that, the story was over. Corday believes that people remember the possession storyline because the effects were so strange. The audience saw this wonderful goddess of beauty, wisdom, and light, and she's floating around with green eyes doing horrible things. Despite the controversy the storyline garnered for the soap, Days actually brought the devil back in 2021, possessing not only Marlena, but her 2 twin grandchildren, Johnny and Allie, as well as Doug Williams, one half of an iconic Days super couple.
Doc, I've got some warm soup for you.
Go ahead, freaking whip. I'll eat this with pea soup. But oh, God! Goodbye!
Alright, that's all the crazy I can handle for one video. Let me know if I missed any insane soap opera storylines from the 80s and 90s that you still remember. And please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Okay, bye!